Welcome back. Good evening. All eyes, of course, are on that big meeting, the big bilateral that is going to happen between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump. In minutes from now, the much-awaited bilateral talks between both leaders is all set to happen. This is the 7th consecutive G7 summit that Prime Minister Modi is attending. The Prime Minister held key bilateral meetings with several world leaders on the sidelines, and today the spotlight shifts to the bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and US President Trump. Both leaders greeted each other. Yesterday, it was the first time that both came face to face after 16 months. And last time these two leaders met was in February 2025 at the White House in Washington, shortly after Trump's inauguration. Then the relations nosedived due to a number of issues. That's why the enhanced focus on this bilateral, which is about to happen. The biggest issue is killing of 3 Indian sailors after US attacks on commercial ships in the Omani waters just a week ago. Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday spoke about the issue during an address to the G7 leaders. He spoke about how the safety of the seafarers is a collective responsibility. Now remember, this summit, the G7 leaders, includes Donald Trump as well. Here's what the Prime Minister said. Let's break down the details. These are the pointers we're getting for you. The Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Several Indian civilians lost their lives. Safety of seafarers is our responsibility. Seafarers connect nations via maritime trade. We must ensure sea routes remain secure and that seafarers should be able to work without fear." So clearly, here the emphasis was on how unsafe it has become, on the attacks that are taking place and the fact that Indians lost their lives. And there is another issue that needs attention, and it raises several questions, and those issues are about America's intent on where does US actually want to take the ties with India. Ahead of this crucial bilateral, Donald Trump's administration changed the name of its Pacific Command to the one that was called Indo-Pacific Command to Pacific Command. The context here is crucial. So in 2018, Trump administration changed the name US Pacific Command to US Indo-Pacific Command. It was then seen as a sign of growing importance of India to the Pentagon. Now, US has renamed US Indo-Pacific Command to US Pacific Command. In 2018, Trump administration changed the name, but that decision has now been reversed. Let's go across to my colleague Stranger, who is getting us more details on that. There are a lot of issues. In fact, the tense moments between India and America began when Donald Trump said that he's the one who brokered peace, he's the one who called for a ceasefire, and then you had the issue of tariffs, the increase in fees of US H-1B visa, the issue of immigration, and the latest, of course, is the killing of the Indian sailors. Ever since that claim of brokering peace to what has happened now, the killing of Indian sailors, things have not been good between both the countries. So that's why many, in fact, the entire world is watching this very, very closely.
Yes. President Trump's statements after Sindoor was a little over a year ago. And these 12, 13 months have been very crucial in the sense that too many negative things have happened. And surely both sides will have to admit that the relationship, the special relationship, the relationship that was supposed to be the most significant one of the 21st century has not gone forward at all. Now this has to be repaired. Now if damage repair is the issue, will a half-an-hour meeting be enough? Now just half an hour has been assigned to the meeting. Now whether this extends beyond half an hour is something we have to look at. But clearly the first and the most recent problem that can be brought up is the death of 3 Indian citizens. Now that's naturally something Prime Minister has already spoken about. Then, of course, the matters that relate to economic issues. Then the fact that Prime Minister has been invited to America and President Trump is expected to come to India. Will all that happen? If they do go through,
absolutely,
then you realize
it's
that maybe things will improve.
Yes, no one can predict what Donald Trump is going to say, but Donald Trump on one hand criticized India's economy, called it a dead economy. He also called India and other countries hellholes. While on the other hand, on social media, he was always very, appreciative of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, praised the Prime Minister and called him a great PM and a wise man. Now, US President Donald Trump has injected a dose of trademark bravado into the final day of the G7 summit in France, jokingly declaring, "I am the boss." As he entered a meeting of world leaders chaired by French President Emmanuel Macron, the remark came as Trump walked into the summit session with fellow leaders already seated around the table. Let's take a look at the sequence first.
Hello, I'm the boss. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
How are you? Hello, I'm the boss. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
How are you?
All right, we're getting some breaking inputs at the moment on the broadcast. US President Donald Trump has hailed the deal with Iran. He says Iran will never have a nuclear weapon and the Strait of Hormuz will open soon. So Donald Trump, they're making a big statement. Now, as the issue of nuclear weapons is concerned, he maintains his stand, America's stand. But on the issue of Strait of Hormuz, Donald Trump says that the Strait of Hormuz will be open soon.
It's a great deal for a lot of reasons, but number one, by far, 99.9% is they will never have a nuclear weapon, and you can't give Iran a nuclear weapon. Most people seem to be very happy. Who's really happy is the market, because the market's gone up thousands of points over the last 4 or 5 days since hearing about it. And the Strait is going to be opening. It's already partially opened. It's going to be opening up soon in full over the next day or two. And oil has come tumbling down. Oil is at $73 or $74, and it's getting to very close to where it was before.
Let's go across to our managing editor joining us live from France. Donald Trump already giving everyone a lot of talking points. As far as the deal with Iran is concerned, he says it's a great deal. Yes, he reiterates his stand on the nuclear weapons, but at the same time, he emphasizes that the Strait of Hormuz will open soon.
Yeah, so I think as per the draft agreement that's been shared, I think some other media outlets have got access to it. Al Arabiya has been reporting about it. CNN has been reporting about it. The first step that they would take is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz once the agreement is signed on Friday in Geneva in Switzerland. That's not too far from here. In fact, it's in a place called Birkenstock, which is a short distance away from Zurich. So yes, that is the hope, that once the deal is signed between the American and Iranian representatives on Friday, the Strait of Hormuz will reopen. But will it be the status quo ante as it existed prior to February 28th when America and Israel launched this war on Iran? No, I very much doubt it. Iran will start charging what they call a service fee for every commercial tanker that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. We don't know how much that could be per tanker. It could be anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million per commercial tanker. And that's only going to add to costs, the cost of shipping, the cost of insurance. And ultimately, I think the price of oil, too, will remain at a certain elevated level because of this, even if the Strait were to open. Yes, it has fallen from $100 plus now to about $80, $82 a barrel, which is good for a country like India, which imports 80% of its crude. So I think, yes, there is a great deal of relief. There is a collective sense of heaving of a sigh of relief, really, in the room here in Evian, where the meeting has been going on for the last 3 days. Today is the final day. In fact, right after the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump leaves here. I believe he's going to Versailles and then eventually leaves back to the US. Same is the case with Prime Minister Modi. He leaves right after this meeting. He goes to Paris. He spends the night in Paris, and tomorrow there are 2 events that he attends in Paris. One is a tech event. It's called Viva Tech, supposedly the biggest tech event in all of Europe, and India is a partner country this year. India will be showcasing some of the top tech talent, and startup community folks will be there as well. And the second and final event for the Prime Minister is the Indian Diaspora event. That's again happening in Paris tomorrow evening, after which he departs. But all eyes really on this all-important meeting with Donald Trump for the reasons that we mentioned earlier as well, whether it's the killing of the sailors, whether it's the possible downgrading of the Indo-Pacific and the Quad, and and of course the all-elusive trade agreement, the interim trade agreement. All of these issues will have to be spoken about, and some kind of understanding or reset needs to be arrived at, because these issues have really, in a sense, derailed the relationship. The onus now is on both the leaders to put the relationship back on the track.
In fact, reporting there from Evian, I'm going to request you to stay on with us, Zaka. And in fact, just to remind our viewers that the world leaders have gathered in the French city of Evian for the G7 huddle. India is not a G7 member, but in today's geopolitical landscape, India is being made part of such conversations has become a global necessity. This is the 7th consecutive G7 meet that Prime Minister Modi is attending, and PM Modi has held key bilateral meetings with several world leaders on the sidelines, and today the spotlight shifts to the bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump. Both the leaders greeted each other earlier, and yesterday it was the first time they came face to face after 16 months. In fact, the first bilateral in 16 months that will be beginning shortly. The last time these two leaders met face to face was, of course, in 2025. We've seen them meet at the White House in Washington, D.C. We've also seen shortly after Trump's inauguration, and in fact, relations since have been nosediving due to a number of issues, and that's why the enhanced focus on the bilateral meeting this time round. So what really are the issues when it comes to India and US, and what really are the sticking points? Can this meeting then reset the strained ties? There's hope, but there are dark clouds as well. First up, when both met each other yesterday, they didn't share a hug, there was just a handshake. This despite the mutual praise on social media over the last few months. Let's tell you the key flashpoints between India and US when it comes to bilateral relations. The first was on May 10, 2025, when Trump declared ceasefire during Operation Sindoor. Trump had also claimed that US brokered peace between India and Pakistan. India then denied Trump's brokering peace claims. On 18 June 2025, Trump overtures towards Pakistan were seen, and hosts Pakistan's Asim Munir at the White House as well. In August 2025, and in April 26, Trump calls India a dead economy. We've also seen a comment calling it a hellhole. Clearly, that's not a statement that went down well in India as well. On the 7th of August 2025, US imposed 25% tariffs on Indian goods. In August 27, we've also seen 2025, of course, tariffs doubling over the Russian oil imports issue. In March 2026, US attacked Iranian vessels in the Indian Ocean, and the vessel had participated in a naval exercise at Vishakhapatnam. On the 10th of June 2026, there were attacks taking place on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz with Indian sailors on board. 3 Indian sailors were killed. No apology coming in from the US on that occasion as well. So let's go right back to Zaka Jacob, who's with us from Avian. Zaka Jacob, we've actually been able to sort of look at the various issues, the big flashpoints, whether it's tariffs, whether it's the recent killing of Indian sailors, whether it's issues related to India and Pakistan, the announcements coming in from Trump's side. Clearly, there's a lot that will have to be figured out at this bilateral meeting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, those sticking points are very much valid. I think it's fair to say that the India-US relationship is not necessarily in the best of health right now. There are some serious sticking points. The sailors issue is the most proximate one. It's the most recent one. Yesterday, in his opening comments at the G7, the Prime Minister did talk about safety of seafarers in international waters. He didn't specifically or directly refer to this incident, but he did definitely talk about the safety of seafarers. It is widely expected that he will directly take up this issue with President Trump when that bilateral meeting begins. The feeling in India was that the Indian government needed to do more, needed to assert itself more, and push back against this kind of behavior by the US Navy. After all, you know, these Indian sailors were not killed by Iranian fire or by Houthi fire or by Hamas fire. They were killed by a friendly nation. So it needs to be conveyed to them at the highest level that this is not acceptable for India. This is a red line that cannot be crossed ever. ever again. I think complicating that was also the fact that, and you alluded to it a moment ago, the statement put out by the State Department after the conversation, the phone conversation between Dr. Jaishankar and Marco Rubio, expressed no remorse. It didn't say any apology. It was a very contrite statement, as though, you know, it was entirely the fault of the sailors, and they should have known better, or they should have known that they were in a war zone. So it seemingly put all the blame on the sailors, and that's why when I spoke to Ian Bremmer yesterday, and he said up front that Trump should apologize to Modi, an apology should be forthcoming, because that's the only way both sides can put this chapter behind them. While this is the more proximate, more recent, more outrageous issue, the trade issue, frankly, has been the perennial issue, because for the last year plus now, India and the US have been trying to negotiate this interim trade agreement. It has still not been concluded. Next week, Jameson Greer, who's the US trade representative, is going to be in India. Again, we are no closer to knowing how soon both sides can ink that deal.
Right.
So I think, you know, on the substantive issues as well as on the more proximate issues, there are concerns that need to be ironed out.
All right, Zaka, stay with us, because as you rightly mentioned, the Prime Minister used the G7 summit in France to highlight the safety of seafarers and maritime workers days after 3 Indian sailors were killed in a US strike on a tanker near Oman. With US President Trump present in the room, Prime Minister Modi said that global sea routes must remain secure and that sailors should be able to carry out their duties without fear. He also said that this is the collective responsibility of all to be able to provide a safe passage for sailors to work at sea. Now, that's a statement, of course, that came in from the Prime Minister. And in fact, viewers, there's been a major name change from the US military command structure as well. Washington has dropped Indo from the US Indo-Pacific Command, restoring it to its earlier name, which is the US Pacific Command. This is a move that has been justified by US as an effort to honor the command's historical identity and institutional legacy. Meanwhile, the USPACOM has put out a wrong map of India on their website earlier. This wrong map shows POK as part of Pakistan territory. Congress party has slammed the Modi government over it, asking why do we need adversaries when PM Modi has such exploitative friends. The BJP has, however, said that POK remains an integral part of India and it will soon be a part of India as well. Listen in.
This is hurting the emotions of India. Imagine, on one hand, what are we saying? What are we seeing? We are hearing about Indo-US bilateral meeting with President Trump and Prime Minister on one hand. On the other hand, 3 sailors lost their lives. Now in the India map of India, the Jammu and Kashmir and the POK shown as Pakistan. How is it acceptable?
If any country thinks that they can claim Jammu Kashmir, and by saying that Jammu Kashmir will become theirs, and Congress party agrees to it, great. But don't worry, this is Modi. The whole Jammu Kashmir, even POK, is going to be ours. And that or they also, you will cry, I know.
अमेरिका का जो तरीक़ाकार है वो दुनिया को लड़ाना है। जहाँ तक पीओके का तल्लक है वो डिस्प्यूटेड है। वहाँ सीज़ फायर यूनाइटेड नेशंस की करारदाद के तहत हुआ था। तो ये जो चीज़ें हैं, ये अमेरिका जो है ये सारी दुनिया को लड़ा रहा है। और मैं समझता हूँ कि इसका नोटिस हमारे फॉरेन अफेयर्स मिनिस्ट्री को लेना चाहिए और इसका सख्त जवाब देना चाहिए।
And joining us now, of course, is Ambassador Atul Keshav. He has, of course, served here in India as well. He has served as a charge d'affaires and ad interim envoy of the U.S. Embassy here in New Delhi. And, of course, at the same time, wears many hats. He's also, of course, leading the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as the president of the U.S.-India Business Council. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador Atul Keshav. It's a very, very crucial bilateral meeting. A meeting that's happening after a fairly long gap of about 16 months and a lot of points of friction between the two countries that we've seen during this intervening period. What are your expectations? Are we going to look at some big takeaways? What are you expecting?
Well, thanks for having me. Look, I think it's critical that both countries strive to find relevance in the relationship. They need to recover some of the lost ground of the past few weeks and months. I think it's very good that the president and the prime minister will be meeting and talking. There is much that is positive on the agenda. Look, I get that we're in a bit of a tough moment right now, and I do worry about a little bit of drift between Delhi and Washington. I think it's important that the two sides take active steps to turn that drift back into convergence. We have urgent work to do on AI, on the digital economy, on the nuclear energy, on semiconductors, and so much else, defense, you name it. The sky's the limit. And I want to put it within the backdrop of the larger trend line in world affairs. The U.S. and India together are in a foot race with China, particularly on AI. And if we can't work together well to empower our relative strengths, then there is the risk that the future of the world is led by the Chinese tech stack. And I don't think that would be good for America or India. So I am encouraging as much as I possibly can that both governments meet, talk, as they are doing today in France, and work on that positive, forward-looking agenda of work that is so important for our free people.
Ambassador Keshav, I must also draw your attention to the most recent issue of concern here in India. And you would also agree the killing of Indian sailors who are just doing their job there, they were not part of the conflict in any way, has caused a huge amount of concern here in India. In fact, there's a huge amount of political pressure also on the government from the opposition parties here. But unfortunately, in the statement, as my colleague Zaka was just mentioning, coming in from Washington, D.C., there was absolutely no mention of any kind of regret for that killing. Now, that's really going to be something that US will have to work on. Do you expect to see some movement in that regard as well today?
Well, it's deeply, deeply unfortunate what happened with those sailors. And, you know, I think India has made very strong representations to the United States. I'm sure Prime Minister Modi will do that with President Trump. He did a little bit of that yesterday during the broader G7 meeting. And so India's perspective is very clear. I think what this reveals to me is that there aren't enough conversations happening between Delhi and Washington about each other's perspectives, or if those conversations are happening, we seem to be talking past each other. And I think that, you know, both countries need to strive for relevance with each other. There is this perception in Washington that I am hearing that, you know, India and America are not quite meshing on the gov-to-gov relationship, and there needs to be more work. I think the Critical Minerals Framework Agreement was very important. That was agreed during Secretary Rubio's visit. There's much more work on the AI stack, on defense, on energy that needs to happen. If those things can move forward, then we can also kind of re-find our footing despite this, as I said, tragic development.
Right. And also, of course, the larger issues of a trade deal, while, of course, there are talks for a trade deal, finality on that is yet awaited. Jamieson Greer, of course, expected next week here in New Delhi. But, you know, all of this also happening parallelly along with the kind of concerns in relation to tariffs. How quickly do you think the two countries can get over these issues? Because there's been a lot of friction, you know, the huge amount of tariffs that have been imposed, for instance, in the past. All of that has left a lot of bitter aftertaste as well. You'd also agree.
So I've been going around the United States, and soon I'll be going around India as part of the USIBC Great States Initiative. I've been in California, Texas, other places. People are bullish on India. If you look at the amount of business deals that are being arranged between American and Indian companies on the AI and tech stack, the data centers, the semiconductors, and so much else, there's enormous optimism between the business community for each other in America and India. I want that for the governments. And as I have said repeatedly till I'm blue in the face, we are many decades overdue on having a meaningful trade agreement between the United States and India. It would create a framework of confidence for investors in both directions. I know that Ambassador Greer, our trade representative, is going to be in India in a few days. I wish him great luck, he and his Indian counterparts. But it's time to get this deal done. You know, it's been 16 months of negotiation, tough negotiation. It needs to get finalized if we are going to actualize the full potential of the U.S.-India relationship and hit the target of $500 billion in trade every year. We're at half of that. And, you know, in an era where we face shared strategic competition and pressures, we need to get our act together. So I am wishing both governments expeditious good luck in getting that deal done. And I hope they can hammer out a trade agreement that includes a tariff basis that's good for both sides.
Right. And Ambassador Keshav, I must also ask you this, because you've served here in India. You understand the sensitivities of all of these issues, and which is why when a little less than a decade ago, the announcement of the Indo-Pacific Command happened, it was being seen as a big step in the future, how India would play a very important role as far as America is concerned, as far as, the signing of so many defense contracts, logistics agreements, so on and so forth. And of course, increasingly, India using American military hardware as well, that it was a step in that direction. Now, with the Pacific Command announcing today, just in fact, less than 12 hours before this bilateral meeting, that they're dropping the Indo from the Indo-Pacific Command. What is the message that this is signaling? Because many also would try and link this with, whether the Quad really has a future. The Quad hasn't really been meeting the manner in which it had been meeting, say, 2 years or 5 years ago.
Well, look, I think our Chinese friends always hated the shifting of nomenclature to the Indo-Pacific Command. So maybe Beijing is happy today, but I will tell you that as soon as an American warship transits the Straits of Malacca or sails past Perth and Fremantle in Australia, it's in the Indian Ocean all the way up to the other side of the Maldives. So there's an enormous part of the Indian Ocean that is in the Indo-Pacific Command, including India, the largest country on Earth and the fastest growing large economy on Earth. So, I think this reflects something I said earlier, that there is a lack of relevance in the gov-to-gov relationship between Delhi and Washington that needs to be recovered fast, lest we move towards some form of drift. And I'm very worried about that. I've put 25 years of my professional life into trying to build the U.S.-India relationship. And I think we need to remember that we have shared adversaries and shared challenges. And if we don't get it right between us, there may be others who call the shots on the latter half of the 21st century. And I don't think Delhi or Washington can afford that.
A very, very important message indeed. Will others end up calling the shots of the two countries? The world's oldest and the world's largest democracy are not united. That's a very important question that indeed you raised there. Thanks so much, Ambassador Keshav, for joining us and sharing with us your perspective. There's some breaking news coming in at the moment. Prime Minister Modi has put out a statement saying that it was wonderful meeting European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Evian earlier today. At the start of this year, India was proud to host them for our Republic Day celebrations. This has been a great time for India-EU ties as we have concluded the free trade agreement. During our talks, we discussed how to further deepen economic linkages in the times to come, and our growing cooperation can play an important role in strengthening peace, stability and prosperity in today's global environment. So important statement coming there out of Evian as well. Stand by for the bilateral meeting that is expected to begin any moment from now. Slipping into a quick break.